Hi guys, this is CA Balakrishna. In this class we are going to revise SA 200 overall objectives of auditor and conduct of audit in accordance with standards on auditing. Basically by November 2022 attempt I will try to complete a revision of all the standards on auditing. Okay, in this class we will be revising SA 200. Now first of all, before revising the standard, most of the students will feel difficulty to remember the standards. They will be easily able to understand the standard, but they will be feeling difficulty to remember the standard. In order to easily remember the standard, the only thing that you have to do is, first of all, you should get a brief idea of what the standard covers. Okay, once you see the name of the standard, you should get an idea of what the standard covers. Okay, you should get a brief structure of what the standard covers. That is the only way to easily remember the entire standard. Okay, so first of all, before discussing the standard, I'll explain you what will be covered in this SA 200. Okay, what we are going to discuss in this SA 200. Basically there are two aspects that we will be discussing in this SA 200. Okay, by seeing name of the standard, you'll easily understand that the first one is objectives of the independent auditor. Okay, this is the first one that we are going to discuss in this standard. Okay, while conducting audit of financial statements, there are certain objectives that have to be achieved by the auditor. Okay, what are those objectives? That will be discussed by SA 200. Now, for achieving these objectives, there are certain requirements that has to be possessed by the auditor. Okay, even these requirements will also be discussed in this essay. Okay, now what are the two aspects that we are going to discuss in this essay? First one is objectives that the auditor has to achieve during the audit. Now, to achieve these objectives, there are certain requirements that the auditor has to possess. What are these requirements? Okay, there are two objectives, there are 5 requirements. Once we discuss these objectives and these requirements, the standard gets completed. Okay, these are the two aspects that will be dealt by this standard. Okay, now let us enter into standard. See, this standard deals with what will be dealt in this standard. Objectives of independent auditor. Okay, the objectives that the auditor has to achieve while performing audit of financial statements. There are basically 2 objectives that we'll discuss. Okay, now to achieve these objectives, there are certain requirements that has to be possessed by the auditor. Basically there are 5 requirements that has to be possessed by the auditor that we'll be discussing. Okay, now for the purpose of easily understanding or for the purpose of easily remembering the requirements, I have divided it them into 2 types. Okay, those types we will discuss while revising the requirements portion. But basically there are 5 requirements. Okay, 2 objectives, 5 requirements. Once we complete these 2 plus 7 or 2 plus 5 7, our standard will get completed. Okay, hope this is clear. Now let us enter into objectives of auditor. Okay, objectives of auditor. First of all, auditor is conducting audit of financial statements. Why he is conducting audit of financial statements? Okay, he is conducting audit of financial statements. Why he is conducting? He is conducting audit in order to increase the confidence of intended users on financial statements. Okay, the financial statements of entity will be used by various third parties like banks, financial institutions, governments and various other authorities will use the financial statements of the entities. Okay, now the auditor wants to increase the confidence of those intended users on the financial statements of the entity. That is the reason why auditor is conducting the audit of financial statements. Now, in order to increase the confidence of those external users, first of all, auditor has to get confidence himself. Okay, first of all, auditor has to get himself confidence on the financial statements of the entity. Okay, only if he is able to get confidence on the financial statements of the entity, he will be able to give the report, and based on the report, the confidence of external users will be increased. Okay, thereby the first objective is to obtain reasonable assurance. Assurance means confidence. Okay, the first objective is auditor has to obtain reasonable assurance that financial statements as whole are free from material misstatements, whether due to fraud or error. Okay, what is the first objective? The objective is auditor has to obtain a reasonable assurance, that is a reasonable confidence, that financial statements of the entity as a whole are free from material misstatements, whether due to fraud or error. Basically, misstatements might occur due to two reasons. One is fraud and another one is error. What is the difference between these fraud and error? Basically, if misstatements occur intentionally, okay, if any person commits misstatements intentionally, that will be known as fraud. If any person commits misstatements unintentionally, that would be known as error. That would be the basic difference between fraud and error. Okay, now the auditor has to get reasonable assurance. Here you can observe the term reasonable is used. Basically, there will be two types of assurances. One is absolute assurance, another one is reasonable assurance. Absolute assurance means 100% assurance, 100% confidence. Auditor will not be able to get 100% confidence because due to inherent limitations of the audit. Okay, thereby auditor will always get only reasonable assurance. Okay, what is meant by reasonable assurance? Reasonable assurance means a high level of assurance, but not absolute assurance. Hope that is clear. Okay, now you are saying that auditor has to obtain reasonable assurance. How much of confidence the auditor has to get? Okay, how much of assurance the auditor has to get? The assurance that is sufficient in order to enable the auditor to express opinion on whether financial statements are prepared in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework or not. Okay, that means auditor has to get reasonable assurance that financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatements, whether due to fraud or error. Okay, that is the first point. Now you are using the term reasonable assurance. How much of reasonable assurance? The reasonable assurance that is sufficient to the auditor to enable him to express opinion on whether financial statements are prepared as per applicable financial reporting framework or not. That much amount of reasonable assurance has to be obtained by the auditor. Okay, the reasonable assurance that is sufficient to enable the auditor to express opinion on whether financial statements are prepared as per applicable financial reporting framework or not. Okay, that much of reasonable assurance has to be obtained by the auditor. Hope this is clear. Now you here the term used is applicable financial reporting framework. What is meant by applicable financial reporting framework? Basically, the applicable financial reporting framework is the reporting framework that is used by the entity for the purpose of preparation of financial statements. Example would be our Ind AS or normal accounting standards. Those will be examples of financial reporting frameworks. Basically, if you see, there will be two types of financial reporting frameworks. One is fair presentation framework, another one is compliance framework. Now, what is this fair presentation framework? What is this compliance framework? Basically, compliance framework means the financial statements has to be prepared as per the framework. Okay. Okay, the financial statements has to be prepared as per this framework only. You need to completely comply with this framework. Okay, that would be known as compliance framework. Whereas in case of fair presentation framework, you have to prepare the financial statements as per the fair presentation framework only. But apart from preparing the financial statements as per fair presentation framework, management has to give acknowledgement or a disclosure, you can say. Okay, what type of disclosure management has to give? It has to give a disclosure stating that in case, okay, while preparing the financial statements, in case management feels that in order to increase the fair presentation of these financial statements, okay, in order to increase the fair presentation of financial statements, if we have to make additional disclosures, or if we have to deviate from the financial reporting framework, then we will make the additional disclosures, or we will deviate from the financial reporting framework for the purpose of increasing the fair presentation of the financial statements. That type of acknowledgement or disclosure has to be given by the management in case of this presentation framework. Okay, that is the main difference between these two financial reporting frameworks. Hope that is clear. Next, basically that would be the first objective of the auditor. Now, auditor has achieved his first objective. Okay, he has obtained reasonable assurance. Now, what would be the second objective? Once he has obtained the reasonable assurance, the next objective is to give report on the financial statements. Okay, that is the second objective, to report on the financial statements and communicate as required by the standards on auditing. Okay, these are the two objectives of the auditor. Hope this is clear. Now here I have given what is meant by a reasonable assurance. Reasonable assurance means high level of assurance but not absolute assurance. I have already explained this. Now assurance means confidence. What is meant by assurance? It is a confidence. Okay, those are the two objectives that the auditor has to achieve as per SA 200. Now, what if auditor fails to achieve these two objectives? Okay, SA 200 says that auditor, you achieve these two objectives during your audit of financial statements. Now, auditor asking, what if I fail to achieve these two objectives? Okay, if you fail to achieve these two objectives, you report in the audit report. Okay, the type of opinion that you give, what is that? Modified opinion. Okay, it would be either qualified opinion or disclaimer or withdrawal of opinion. Okay, in case the auditor fails to achieve the audit objectives as per SA 200, he has to give modified opinion in the audit report. Basically there will be three types of modified opinions. What are they? First one is qualified opinion. When the auditor will give qualified opinion, there are two situations in which auditor will give qualified opinion. Basically these types of opinions we will discuss detailedly while discussing SA 700. Here just I will give an idea. Okay, auditor will give qualified opinion when he has obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and based on this sufficient appropriate audit evidence, auditor feels that misstatements are material but not pervasive. This is the first situation in which auditor will give qualified opinion. Second situation, auditor not obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Okay, auditor has not obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence, but auditor feels that in case there are any misstatements, those misstatements will be material only but not pervasive. Okay, auditor not obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence, but auditor feels that in case there are any misstatements, those misstatements will be material only but not pervasive. Okay, in these two situations auditor will give qualified opinion. Next, adverse opinion. When will auditor give adverse opinion? There is only one situation. Auditor has obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and based on this sufficient appropriate audit evidence, auditor feels that the misstatements are both material and pervasive. In this situation, auditor will give adverse opinion. Next, disclaimer of opinion. When will auditor will give disclaimer of opinion? Auditor has not obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Okay, auditor has not obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and auditor feels that in case there are any misstatements in the financial statements, those misstatements will be both material and pervasive. Okay, in this situation, auditor will give disclaimer of opinion. That means disclaimer means he will not give a opinion at all. Okay, hope this is clear. These are the three types of opinions. Okay, based on the situation, he will give the opinion that is applicable to the situation. In case he is not able to he is not able to achieve the objectives that are prescribed in SA 200. Hope this is clear. By that we have completed objective portion. Okay, 2 objectives we have completed. Now to achieve these 2 objectives, auditor need to have some requirements. How many requirements? There are 5 requirements that we have discussed while starting the SA 200. What are those 5 requirements? Okay, now for the purpose of easily remembering these requirements, I have divided them into 2 types. Okay, firstly, qualities of auditor. Secondly, duties of auditor. Okay, there are 3 qualities of auditor, there are 2 duties of auditor. Total there are 5 requirements. Okay, that means to achieve those 2 objectives, auditor need to have these 3 qualities and these 2 and has to perform these 2 duties. Okay, 3 qualities, 2 duties to achieve 2 objectives. Okay, now first of all, let us see what are the qualities that the auditor has to possess in order to achieve the objectives. First one, ethical requirements. Auditor need to comply with the ethical requirements. Now what will be included in these ethical requirements? There are 3 things that are included in these ethical requirements. What are they? First one, auditor need to comply with code of ethics. Code of ethics issued by ICAI. Next, auditor need to have all these fundamental principles. There are 5 fundamental principles. What are they? Integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, professional competence and due care, and professional behavior. These are the 5 fundamental principles that the auditor should possess. Now we'll discuss them. Integrity. What is meant by integrity? Integrity means being truthful. Okay, the auditor should not give false information. He should always be truthful. Okay, next, objectivity. What is meant by objectivity? Basically, this objectivity is used in relation to decision making. Okay, there are 2 types of terminologies. One is objective decision making, another one is subjective decision making. What is the difference between these 2? Objective decision making means you are taking a particular decision based on the facts. Okay, if you are taking the decisions based on the facts, that would be known as objective decision making. Okay, that would be objectivity. In case you are making the decisions not based on facts, okay, as per your wish you are taking the decisions, okay, as per your feelings you are taking the decision, that would be subjective decision making. Okay, the auditor should always take objective decisions only. That means the decisions of the auditor must be based on the facts. That is objectivity. Okay, next, confidentiality. You know this, auditor need to maintain confidentiality. Next, professional behavior. Auditor need to behave professionally. And the last one is professional competence and due care. While performing his duties, auditor must exercise due care and he should always be updated with the latest updates. That would be professional competence. Okay, these are the 5 fundamental principles. And the next one is auditor must be independent. Independent means even this independence is also related to decision making only. That means the decisions that are taken by the auditor should not be dependent on a third party. Okay, mostly students will be confusing between this independence and objectivity. These 2 terms are relating to decision making only. What is the difference between these 2? See, objective decision making means auditor must take decisions based on facts. That would be objective decision making. Next one, independence means the decisions that are taken by the auditor should not be influenced by a third party. Okay, that would be the difference between objectivity and independence. Hope this is clear. By this we have completed ethical requirements. That is the first requirement or the first quality that the auditor should possess in order to achieve the objectives that are specified under this standard. Okay, next requirement, professional judgment. What is meant by professional judgment? See, even this professional judgment is also used in relation to decision making. Okay, for decision making, auditor needs to apply his knowledge, his experience and his training. Okay, there are three terms. One is knowledge, one is experience and another one is training. Auditor need to apply these three things in order to take informed decisions. That would be known as professional judgment. Okay, let us see. Professional judgment, application of training, knowledge and experience in making informed decisions. Okay, this training, knowledge, experience relating to what? Relating to audit and accounting aspects. Okay, the training and the knowledge that the auditor has obtained relating to this auditing and accounting has to be used by the auditor for the purpose of taking informed decisions. That would be known as professional judgment. Auditor need to apply his professional judgment. Okay, now there are certain areas in which the auditor can use his professional judgment. What are they? While determining materiality. Okay, there is separate standard that will be dealt with the materiality, that is SA 320. There will be clearly understanding relating to this concept of materiality. And while determining audit risk, he need to apply professional judgment. And while determining nature, timing, extent of audit procedure, while drawing conclusion based on audit procedure, and evaluating sufficiency and appropriateness of audit procedure. These are the some of the areas in which auditor can use his professional judgment. Okay, that is the second quality or the second requirement that the auditor should possess in order to achieve the two objectives. Okay, moving to the third quality, professional skepticism. What is meant by this professional skepticism? Basically, in this professional skepticism, there will be two things. One is questioning mind. The auditor should have questioning mind. Okay, and another one is auditor should be alert. These are the two aspects that will be covered in this professional skepticism. See, professional skepticism, attitude of having questioning mind. The auditor must always have a questioning mind and being alert to condition which may indicate possible misstatement due to fraud or error. Okay, at all the times auditor must be alert in order to identify whether there are any misstatements due to fraud or error. Let's say, for example, auditor has obtained some internal evidence. Basically, this professional skepticism will be mainly useful while obtaining the audit evidences. Let's say auditor has obtained some internal evidence relating to some goods purchased by the entity. Okay, once the entity purchases the goods and the goods are received in the godown, the goods receipt note will be prepared in the entity. That will be a internal document. Okay, now in this goods receipt note, there are the quantity that is mentioned is 50 kg. Okay, this is the internal evidence that the auditor has obtained. Auditor will also obtain external evidence. Okay, he will cross check external evidence. Let's say purchase invoice. In the purchase invoice, it is 100 kgs. Now there is a difference. Okay, now auditor should become alert. Okay, auditor should become alert. He should use his professional skepticism, okay, to the situations indicating any misstatement due to fraud or error. Okay, that would be one of the area in which auditor can apply his professional skepticism. That would be the third quality or third requirement that the auditor should possess in order to achieve the two objectives. Okay, those were the qualities. Moving to the duties that the auditor has to perform in order to achieve the objectives. The first duty is auditor need to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Okay, auditor need to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Why auditor need to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence? In the objectives, we have discussed that the main objective of the auditor is to obtain a reasonable assurance. Okay, how the auditor will get reasonable assurance? Okay, he will get the reasonable assurance by collecting evidences. Okay, by collecting sufficient appropriate evidences, the auditor will get a reasonable assurances. Okay, based on the evidences that the auditor has collected, he will get a reasonable assurance on the financial statements of the entities. Okay, that is the reason why auditor will obtain evidences during the audit. Now these evidences must be sufficient and appropriate. Okay, sufficient and appropriate for what? Sufficient and appropriate for reducing the audit risk to acceptably low level. Okay, the auditor has to obtain that much of evidences which are sufficient and appropriate in order to reduce the audit risk to a acceptably low level. Hope this is clear. Okay, auditor has to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to reduce audit risk to acceptably low level. Hope this is clear. Now while obtaining audit evidences, auditor need to utilize his professional judgment to determine whether these evidences are sufficient and appropriate or not. Okay, to determine whether the audit evidences that the auditor has collected are sufficient and appropriate or not, he will use his professional judgment. Okay, auditor will exercise his professional judgment. Now once the evidences are collected, while analyzing the evidences or while going through the evidences, auditor will again use his professional skepticism. Okay, that is, he will question the evidences to determine whether the evidences collected are sufficient and appropriate or not. Hope this is clear. That is relating to obtaining sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. That is the fourth requirement that the auditor should possess, or the duty that the auditor has to perform in order to achieve the objectives that are specified under this standard. Next, and the final duty is conduct audit in accordance with standards of auditing. That means he need to understand the entire text of the standards on auditing. Okay, he need to have an idea of entire text of the standards on auditing. Okay, what the standard says, he need to have an idea. And in case while performing an audit, in case there is any non-compliance with the standards on auditing, he need to report the same in the audit report. Hope this is clear. And another important point is these standards on auditing are applicable to the auditor but not to the management. Okay, by this we have completed revision of SA 200. Okay, in the next class we will revise another standard.